There are people who seem to see through the world, who can feel everything that others hide. They are the quiet ones who sense the shift in a room before anyone speaks, who know when a smile is real and when it's masking something darker. They love deeply, almost painfully. And somehow, those who claim to love them often end up resenting them most. Maybe you've been that person, the one who gives too much, forgives too easily, and feels like loving others only leads to confusion and heartbreak. You wonder, why does my kindness feel like a threat to people I care about? Why do I become the target of envy or distance from those who once adored me? This isn't because you did something wrong. It's because your light reveals what others try to hide. Some people don't want to be seen not truly. They crave affection as validation, not as connection. And when you love them with sincerity, when you see their fears and still stay, it triggers something in them. They feel naked, exposed under the warmth of your empathy. And instead of gratitude, they feel envy. Because while you move from authenticity, they move from emptiness. Your ability to feel becomes a mirror one they can't bear to look into. This reflection runs deep. It reaches the wounds they've buried, the insecurities they've denied. To them, your empathy isn't a gift. It's an unspoken reminder of everything they're not yet ready to face. They love the idea of you, but not the truth of you. Because the truth, your sensitivity, your awareness, your peace, demands they confront themselves. So they start to compete with your calm. They undermine your softness. They mistake your silence for weakness. And in their need to reclaim control, they begin to chip away at you, piece by piece, until you start doubting your own light. But deep down, you already know the ones who try to dim your glow are simply afraid of their own darkness. If these words find you tonight, maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe you're meant to remember that your empathy is not a flaw. It's a language the wounded can't always understand. Stay with me as we explore why this happens, how it unfolds, and what it means for the kind of love you truly deserve. If this resonates with you, take a deep breath. Let's walk through it together. And before we begin, if you find something in these words that speaks to your story, I invite you to subscribe, to stay connected not for numbers, but because you deserve a space that speaks your language. When an empath loves, they don't just offer attention, they offer presence. They enter a room and tune into what isn't being said. They notice the hesitation in a voice, the flicker in someone's eyes, the way laughter hides fatigue. To love as an empath is to listen with the heart before the ears. But not everyone wants to be heard that deeply. There's a strange paradox here. People are drawn to empaths because they crave that warmth, that rare kind of understanding that feels like home. They say things like, "You just get me," or "I've never been able to talk to anyone like this before." And they mean it. At first, your light feels healing. They drink from it as if they've been thirsty their whole lives. But soon, something begins to shift. The same love that made them feel safe now makes them feel small. The same understanding that soothed them begins to reveal their own emotional immaturity. They start to see that while you give from abundance, they give from fear of losing, fear of being unworthy, fear of not being enough. You don't demand anything from them except honesty, and yet that's what scares them the most. So envy creeps in quietly. It's not always loud or obvious. It might look like small criticisms, subtle withdrawals, or emotional distance that doesn't make sense. You'll start to feel the energy change. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly now feel heavy. You sense resistance in their eyes, defensiveness in their tone. And though you can't explain why, something inside you begins to ache because you know what it feels like when love turns into comparison. You'll try to fix it, of course. Empaths always do. You'll think, maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe I'm expecting too much. You'll shrink yourself in hopes of keeping the peace. You'll stop sharing as openly, stop shining as brightly. But what you're really doing is protecting the other person from their own reflection. You're dimming your light so they don't have to face what they lack. And yet, no amount of shrinking ever makes them love you better. Because envy doesn't heal through accommodation, it grows through it. Every time you lower yourself, they feel a temporary relief, but their insecurity deepens. They sense your power, even when you hide it. They know your empathy is not weakness, it's awareness. And awareness terrifies those who survive by illusion. The truth is, when someone pretends to love an empath, it's rarely out of malice, it's out of need. They love the way you make them feel, not the way they make you feel. They love the mirror you hold, not the person holding it. And when that mirror starts reflecting too much truth, they either break it or walk away pretending it was flawed. But here's the part most people never tell you. You are not responsible for how others respond to your light. You are responsible only for keeping it alive. Because your empathy is not meant to be a cage for the broken. It's meant to be a compass for your own becoming. The shift often begins with something small, a tone, a glance, a silence that lingers too long. You start to notice how they speak differently around others, how their words toward you grow sharper while their smiles become practiced. It's subtle, but your body feels it before your mind does. That quiet tightening in your chest, the unease you can't explain, it's your intuition whispering. Something is changing. The person who once praised your heart now begins to question your intentions. They call you too emotional, too sensitive, too much. What they really mean is, you see me too clearly. Your empathy pierces through the masks they've worn for years, and it frightens them. Not because you expose them publicly, but because you make them visible to themselves. And there's nothing more terrifying than being seen by someone who doesn't need words to understand you. At first, you'll try to understand. You'll rationalize their coldness, make excuses for their distance. They're just stressed, you'll say. They're tired. You'll convince yourself it's temporary. But deep down, you know the connection has shifted from love to performance. They're no longer relating to you. They're reacting to how you make them feel about themselves. It's no longer, I love how you understand me. It's become, I hate that you remind me of everything I've buried. Envy doesn't always wear jealousy's face. Sometimes it wears care. Sometimes it sounds like, I'm just worried about you. But there's a hidden edge in their concern, a tone that diminishes, a look that belittles. They start pointing out your flaws, as if finding fault in you will quiet the ache inside them. They may mock your empathy, calling it naive or dramatic. But really, they envy the freedom it gives you to feel deeply without shame, to love without agenda, to walk into pain and still remain soft. This is where many empaths break, not because they're weak, but because they keep trying to prove their worth to people who only feel safe when they're superior. You'll give and give, thinking that maybe one more act of kindness will restore what was lost, but you can't heal someone who resents your ability to love. You can't comfort someone who uses your compassion as proof of their power. Your tenderness will become ammunition in their insecurity. And slowly, you'll begin to lose the sound of your own truth beneath the noise of their projections. But here's what you must remember: their envy is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their emptiness. They see in you what they abandoned in themselves. Your calm, your depth, your authenticity, all the things they secretly wish they had the courage to embody. To them, your empathy is a mirror that won't lie, no matter how much they plead for distortion. So, when you find yourself being punished for your light, it's not because you've done something wrong. It's because you remind others of what's right, what's real. And some hearts simply aren't ready for that kind of truth. There comes a moment when the empath finally feels the weight of it all. The exhaustion isn't from loving too much, it's from being misunderstood too often. You start to feel invisible in relationships that once felt alive. You listen and comfort, but when it's your turn to speak, silence greets you. You begin to realize you've been auditioning for love, proving your kindness, your patience, your loyalty, just to earn the bare minimum of respect. And even that feels conditional. This is when something inside you quietly begins to die. The part of you that once believed that empathy could fix everything starts to crumble. You learn, painfully, that not everyone deserves access to your softness. Because some people interpret your empathy as an invitation to take, to drain, to feed on the safety you provide without ever giving it back. They mistake your care for consent to use you as a place to deposit their pain without ever cleaning the space they leave behind. And still you try. You think maybe if you love harder, listen deeper, they'll finally see your heart, but they won't. Because the problem isn't that they don't see you, it's that they see you too clearly. They see your strength wrapped in tenderness, your ability to stand in truth without needing control, and that makes them feel powerless. To someone who survives by dominance, empathy is rebellion. It's proof that love doesn't have to manipulate to feel strong. So they try to break what they can't become. They provoke you to react, hoping your anger will justify their guilt. They twist your words, question your motives, and when you finally defend yourself, they call you unstable. That's the cruel irony. The empath becomes the villain in the story they never wrote. And for a while you start believing it. You question if maybe you are too much, if maybe you do feel too deeply, if maybe you really should harden up. But deep down, you know that hardening is just another way of abandoning yourself. What most people don't understand is that empathy isn't weakness. It's courage without armor. It's the strength to stay open in a world that rewards indifference. It's the decision to keep feeling when it would be easier not to. But this kind of strength threatens those who can't access it within themselves, because your empathy silently exposes their avoidance. It whispers truths they've spent years trying not to hear. And yet, the empath's journey doesn't end in bitterness. It begins in awakening. When you finally stop chasing approval from those who envy your heart, you start returning home to yourself. You stop trying to convince others of your worth and start honoring it quietly. You no longer explain your intentions to people committed to misunderstanding you. You simply withdraw your energy not out of spite but out of self-respect. And in that silence, something miraculous happens. The world doesn't collapse without their validation. In fact, it expands. You begin to see how much of your light was spent on people who couldn't hold it. You start reclaiming your empathy not as a burden, but as a birthright. When you begin reclaiming your light, everything changes, not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. There's a sacred kind of peace that comes when you stop fighting to be understood. You realize that the ones who pretended to love you never really wanted to meet you. They wanted to manage you. They wanted your presence without your power, your affection without your awareness. They wanted love that wouldn't hold them accountable. And you, in your softness, gave it freely until you learned that unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional access. You start to notice how your energy was always the bridge. You were the one reaching out, apologizing first, explaining your heart in languages that people refuse to learn. And now you're tired of translating. You begin to crave silence more than company. You find yourself walking away mid-conversation, not out of anger, but because you've realized peace is louder than persuasion. There's beauty in that kind of quiet power. You no longer chase closure, you create it. You no longer beg to be seen, you see yourself. And in doing so, you start to draw different people, souls, who aren't threatened by your depth, who don't flinch at your honesty. These are the ones who don't confuse vulnerability with weakness, who don't interpret your empathy as a challenge. They don't envy your light because they carry their own. But before you reach that point, you'll face loneliness, the kind that echoes. Because when an empath rises, the air thins. You lose people who only knew how to love your wounds, not your healing. The silence will tempt you to go back, to dim your glow just to feel less alone. Don't. That's the final test. The universe always asks, will you abandon yourself again just to be loved halfway? Stay still. Let the emptiness do its work. It's not punishment, it's purification. It's where your spirit learns the difference between connection and attachment. You begin to see how much of your giving came from fear, the fear of being too much, too sensitive, too intense. But your intensity was never the problem. It was your company. You were trying to plant gardens in people who feared flowers because they'd never survived a winter. In time, your empathy becomes sharper, wiser. You no longer absorb every emotion you encounter. You feel, but you filter. You love, but you discern. You begin to understand that empathy isn't about rescuing others. It's about recognizing where your energy belongs. It's a compass, not a cage. And that realization sets you free. You look back at the ones who pretended to love you, and there's no bitterness left, just understanding. You see their envy for what it was, pain that didn't know where to go. You realize they weren't your enemies. They were your mirrors. They showed you where you were still trying to earn love instead of embodying it. And with that clarity, forgiveness comes naturally, not as approval, but as release. Because the truth is, empaths don't just heal others. They heal the lineage of silence, shame, and emotional avoidance that's haunted humanity for generations. They do it not by preaching, but by being, by feeling, by refusing to numb. After all the giving, all the breaking, all the lessons disguised as love, the empath stands at the threshold of something sacred peace. It's not the loud, triumphant kind, it's quiet. It hums beneath the skin like a song only your soul remembers. You no longer rush to explain yourself. You no longer seek to prove your heart. You've learned that not everyone who touches your energy deserves to stay. And that letting go isn't loss, it's alignment. You begin to understand that envy is never really about you. It's about what your presence awakens in others. Some will rise with you. Some will resist. Some will try to shrink you so they can feel tall again. But you don't carry resentment anymore, because you've seen what happens when you keep trying to love people who only love your reflection. You've learned that peace costs more than people, but it's always worth the price. There's a strange beauty in that acceptance. You no longer try to save those who envy your light, you simply keep shining. Not to prove anything, but because that's what light does. It illuminates, it warms, it reveals. You realize that your empathy, once your ache, is your gift. It's the reason strangers feel safe around you. It's the reason the broken find rest in your presence. And it's the reason you'll never again settle for love that demands your silence. So you start to live differently, softer but stronger, quieter but clearer. You no longer confuse chaos with passion or guilt with care. You trust your intuition, that gentle, unwavering voice that once felt like a curse, but was always your greatest compass. You love yourself the way you once loved others, fully, faithfully, without needing permission. And one day, you'll meet someone who doesn't flinch at your light, someone who doesn't mistake your empathy for obligation. They'll look at you not as a mirror, but as a world one they want to explore, not control. Their love won't drain you, it will expand you. Because true love doesn't fear depth, it thrives in it. Until then, keep honoring your sensitivity. Keep choosing presence over performance. Keep remembering that your empathy isn't what makes people envy you, it's what makes you extraordinary. If these words found you, it's because you needed a reminder of who you are beneath all the noise. So breathe. You're not too much, you never were. You were simply surrounded by people who couldn't meet you at your depth. If this spoke to your heart, let it ripple outward. Share it with someone who feels unseen, who's still dimming their light just to belong. And if you'd like to journey deeper with me into healing, into truth, into the kind of love that doesn't hurt, subscribe, stay connected, and let's keep walking this path together. You are not alone, you never were.